Okay, but then again, if you're someone who's served, you might be someone who understands the protocols and you might be more inclined to do things in line with the military, which I don't know if that's exactly the right way to do things.
But what about the whole kneeling aspect in itself? Like, soldiers kneel at graves, you know, you kneel before a king. It's a sign of respect. Disrespect the flag. The flag somehow represents the military. The military is constituted of, like soldiers or whatever. And so they follow this, like, weird path down this slippery slope to get to this conclusion from a football player kneeling that he hates the soldiers or something.
Well, because we're people. That's the thing. That is the whole thing. Like, to the military, soldiers are seen as numbers, and that's a huge problem.
Yeah. I don't think that was just World War One because I'm a Korean War expert because I've seen every episode of MASH.
I love this country and the symbolism and all that. Like, okay, fine, knock yourself out, but it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Like, the flag is just some fabric stitched together. Like,
I don't really appreciate the actual institution of the military as we have it in this country, but I 100% respect the troops that make it up.
That
not only demonetized, but the NSA is going to be knocking the door down.
Oh, they totally will.
Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford, and we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, and then how about maybe subscribe to the channel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good idea. Well, I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget that we write our own music, so stick around to the end of the episode, and you might hear something new. You might hear something you've never heard before. You can get it at all of the good places like iTunes and such places, and go to our website at ksmvidcast.com and check out, I don't know, some arcane information or something like that, and keep the conversation going at that point. So, Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, we've gotten through the election. There's still a whole lot of divide in the country. And I've seen something come back into circulation with some recent events. So that Kyle kid that shot some people.
Is that Kyle Rittenhouse?
Rittenhouse, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. People raised $2 million to bail him out. Meanwhile, there's businesses failing and stuff, and they're like, well, let's forget about them and get this kid out that murdered people.
Well, okay, now the thing is, that is context, right? That could be self-defense. It's kind of a sketch, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to be there to understand that.
Well, the people that were there in the video, yeah, it was pretty cut and dry. His mom dropped him off, handed him a gun, and he went shooting people.
See, that's the weird thing. I've heard entirely not that. So, but that's the thing. It's
video of it.
Yeah, but that okay. Anyway, that's a whole. We could go down that rabbit hole another time. So, where are you going with this?
Well, there's a meme that's a comparison, saying I want to live in a country where Colin Kaepernick is seen as a hero and Kyle Rittenhouse is seen as a terrorist. Because the whole kneeling thing wasn't hurting anybody, and then self-defense or not, some kid that wasn't even legally old enough to be using a firearm was using a firearm against people. Like, out in the open, drove from another state altogether just to go allegedly do this thing. And yet we have a guy who kneels for the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever, and everyone just gets all up in arms over it, and somehow takes that and twists it into being a big fuck you to the troops.
Well, can I just say, I'd like to live in a country where neither is true. We just analyze things objectively. But that's a good point, like talking about the troops and stuff. My dad served in Nam, and I've heard stories about soldiers that came back from that war. Like, personally, I think that was a bullshit war. Like, we should have never... Well, most wars are bullshit. But that one in particular was particularly bullshit. Mm-hmm. We should have never been over there. We did more harm than good. And, but the soldiers, they were just... The thing is, like, in the military, it's not like being an employee. You're property of the state as a soldier. So you have to do... Like, there are soldiers that have been shot, like, killed, executed, because they didn't follow orders.
Right. And at that time, there was the draft, right?
Yeah.
So your alternative was to go to prison for refusing to do service for your country.
Yeah.
Or to go possibly die or come back and get spit on and have Agent Orange ruin the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, the thing is, like, people are like, well, you're a draft dodger. Like, I'm like, I don't blame those people. I wouldn't want to fight for some bogus reasons, Like, if it's real, like, here's the thing. If there are people from anywhere coming into this country, like, guns blazing, nukes falling, like, all kinds of crazy shit's happening, like, okay, yeah, take up arms and defend your homeland, right? Mm-hmm. But places you've never been, people you've never met, like, people who have never wronged you, to take up arms and fight against them. I don't have a problem with people circumventing that system to avoid that, because to me it's morally and ethically wrong. Like, that's not... I would never do that. I would do everything in my power to avoid that. So, yes, I think the people who do serve, I value what they did. It's a respectable thing. But the politicians that decide what they do is not so respectable. So, but it's being able to separate those two things, and that's a thing. Like, in Nam, people were like, "Well, that was a bad war. We're doing a wrong thing, and these soldiers, I'm gonna hock a loogie on them." Like, they didn't make that determination.
Yeah, that is so ridiculous that, like, pretty much from after that point on, everything about the military and the soldiers was tied to patriotism and respect, and we had kind of like a standing army from that point on, and so the irony, not that I think it was a good thing at all that they were, like, spitting on soldiers and blaming soldiers, but those soldiers had no choice. They were drafted. Like, they had to go do that. If you're going to be mad at soldiers for going to war, now would be the time, because they choose to sign up for that job. There is no draft.
Well, yeah, and okay.
But again, reiterating, I don't think you should do that.
Sure, and actually, speaking to the now part of it, yeah, now is different than Vietnam or the Korean War, World War II, World War One, like, you name it, and that's U.S. centric. So forgive me for that, but.
The 100 Years' War?
Yeah. But 9/11. I don't have a problem with the soldiers that signed up to fight in that war because they were deceived. all of it was bullshit, like the yellow cake uranium and all this stuff, like, oh, stuff going on here, going on there. Like, it was bullshit. And the media just hook, line, and sinker, bought into it and then fed the same bullshit to the public. And who do you trust? These people thought they were doing the right thing. Intent is really important to consider. Like, they thought those people over there were really bad, and they're fighting against the terrorists or something. Even though they're not. I mean, we can look. Hindsight's 2020. So you can look now and be like, well, that was ridiculous. But at the time, people genuinely thought that it was a justified action. So I don't have any problem with those people.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess the point is that Kaepernick's whole statement was about police brutality, which has absolutely nothing to do with the military or the soldiers, but it gets twisted into this, disrespect the flag. The flag somehow represents the military is constituted of, like soldiers or whatever. And so they follow this, like, weird path down this slippery slope to get to this conclusion from a football player kneeling that he hates the soldiers or something.
Well, and well, that's a good point. Like, imagine if you burned the American flag. Mm-hmm. Are you disrespecting the soldiers at that point?
Hell no.
Exactly. You're totally not. Like,
the soldiers are not the military. Like, just like Americans are not, the ones, going over and bombing other people. That's like a specific entity that comes from America, but it's not all Americans.
The bulk of Americans are not the state,
right?
The government of America, and that's an important distinction to make. And I think it's lost on us because of this whole, like, hyper patriotism, or patriotism. Sorry, like patreon.com/KSMVidcast. I just had to, boom, like. Throw that one. Yeah.
Patriotism.
Yeah. More beer. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, this kind of intertwined web of things. Like, it's inseparable. Like, you can't be, you can't be a rebel and also be a patriot at the same time. You can't be independent. You can't be one thing or the other. Like, I feel like
I see patriotism as wanting the best for you and your loved ones and your country, and holding it to that standard. Whereas, patriotism colloquially now seems to be more about, like, assuming we are already the best, we couldn't possibly get better, and to insinuate that we're somehow not the best is anti-patriotic.
Well, that's a good point. Like, because I think there's always room for improvement.
Right.
We could think, like, hey, we're pretty awesome, and honestly, I think
we're up
for
there.
all its faults. Like, the USA is pretty okay. Yeah. Like, it's a decent country. Could be better, could be worse. But to assume that it's perfection because the founding fathers were the greatest thinkers of the time. Actually, they were actually pretty good at thinking things through and kind of. Well, I think they were chess players. Let's say that.
Yeah, I mean, so far, like, there was a certain point where that clairvoyancy kind of ended, but.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like
they're fallible.
Well, and they had good ideas, but eventually everybody dies.
Yeah.
Right. So then the next generation has to come in and pick up the pieces and figure things out, and it might not be quite as wise as the previous generation.
Yeah. Now, I think, and I don't know that this is even a popular idea, but this is what I think. I think you can be critical of the military, what the military is doing, and 100% support and respect the troops for what they're doing.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: military is only carrying out the doctrine of the politicians, right? Like military brass doesn't one day decide like, hey, by the way, we're just gonna like attack this place or that place. We're gonna like, drop bombs on those people, just drone strike those people over there. No, it comes from the people we vote for,
Yeah.
elected officials. They decide the grand scheme of things, and then it's up to the military to carry out whatever plans they have. And then you've got the soldiers, like the people down at the bottom that have to kind of figure out how to make that happen. And I don't blame them. They're just now the Nazis just following orders. There's a point where you should be like, there should be some allowance to say like, hey, this is wrong.
Yes, and
right?
There is.
Yeah.
In our military, there is actually like the Uniform Code of Justice, I think, is where this is found, but there's some blurb about how you have a duty to refuse immoral orders.
Oh yeah, and honestly, like
that's probably because of the whole Nazi thing.
Bring them to light, like Chelsea Manning, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like, that you want to say like Colin Kaepernick is a hero. That's okay. Well, I'll give you that. But Chelsea Manning is a bigger hero. Like putting your life on the line. Edward Snowden, showing like some bullshit stuff that is going to ruin your life, but it's for the good of everybody that you're illustrating that to everybody.
Yeah.
So man.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like that's the thing that like really gets me about the whole Vietnam thing. Like the soldiers that came back, they had a really if you've done any research into the Vietnam War, like the absolute shitstorm that was the Vietnam War, soldiers went through a lot of stuff on both sides. Like we could talk about us, right? Whoever us is, but there's them, the Viet Cong and all that stuff. All those soldiers. How about their story? It was terrible all around, and we were fighting for literally nothing.
Well, even the Nazi thing, going back to something you said earlier, the individual Nazi soldiers, if they dissented, they'd be shot.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, not to be apologizing for their behavior, but they also kind of had that rock and a hard place situation. Like that's I'm more pissed that we put our soldiers in such a position. All of our military officers and enlisted people really have this edict, like, you are property of the government. You will be treated as a piece of property. You will do and say these certain things. If you're in uniform, you have to act a certain way. You have to do things a certain way. It all has to be like the Borg. And, like, that's kind of fucking with your head. Like, that psychologically, that's not cool. And it's not even necessary to have a well-operating military, honestly.
Well, and just look to, like, Star Trek.
Yeah.
For examples of how to do that right. They kind of went down the Navy angle, but I think they did it pretty well. But yeah, you're right. Like, you can't dissent as a soldier in any military. You probably will be shot. And that's the thing. That's the problem. It's like, the issue there is there are a lot of common sense voices who have very grounded perspectives on things, and they're not allowed to let their voices be heard. Because if they did, they might challenge whatever doctrine or decree the higher ups have. And I think, actually, to me, I'm like, that's exactly what we need, because you have to keep those fucking crackheads in check.
Yeah.
Those politicians, they're all crackheads. Like, they're just gunning to go to war, and we don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting pretty worried for a while there, and I mean this still might be a thing. Like if Donald Trump refuses to leave office, he'll have to be removed by force, and that's going to fall to the military. So then you have this conflict of interest. Like, do they decide to forcibly remove their commander in chief, or do they allow him to basically remove democracy and assert himself as a king or a dictator?
Well,
You know,
and
like-
and that's the thing. Like, I see things a little bit differently, but I think that's a very real concern that a lot of people have, and I think that illustrates some problems, some fractures in the way that things are done. Concerns that we should be like, hey, maybe we should take a step back and reanalyze just the structural elements of this particular system. Should we make revisions? Should we change things? You know,
Yeah.
the scientific way, right?
Well, I think top military orders should not be coming from the president, really.
I agree. Like, the
Especially
thing is, like,
one that's never served. I mean,
well, there's something to be said for people that haven't served as being maybe like an outsider could have.
I see that argument.
you
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
the-
like logically speaking, there's not really any reason to think that somebody without military experience could lead the military, but it doesn't mean to say that it's preferable or more logical to have someone with the experience do it rather than not. you know?
Well, okay, but then again, if you're someone who's served, you might be someone who understands the protocols, and you might be more inclined to do things in line with the military, which I don't know if that's exactly the right way to do things. I honestly, I don't know what the right way to do things is, but I'll say this: it's not war. Like, the last thing we should be doing on planet Earth is fighting each other, especially if you're concerned about things like, I don't know, global warming or climate change or whatever we want to call it, or asteroids, meteorites coming from space. Like, yeah, we got to work together, and stop fighting over like stupid shit like borders and money and the petrodollar and whatnot. But that's a big conversation, probably for another time and more beer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, yeah. All of these people that got so up in arms about kneeling at the flag, like, there's just so many angles about that you could pick apart. I mean, we talked about tying it to soldiers, but what about the whole kneeling aspect in itself? Like, soldiers kneel at graves, you kneel before a king. It's a sign of respect,
Yeah. Well, and like, what is the flag, right? It's a piece of fabric.
Yeah.
It's a symbol. You kneel, you don't, you burn it, you put it out on 4th of July. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It doesn't. If a flag is burned or knelt before, like, it doesn't diminish or expand anything. It's within us.
Yeah.
So I don't care, like, because I'm an individualist. Like, I look to what people do as an individual. The symbol means nothing. It's like the ring from fucking Spaceballs, like the Schwartz and stuff like that. The ring came out of a Cracker Jack box, like, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like,
long time ago, I did a minute microscopy on flag idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
How silly it is to like venerate this piece of cloth and kind of treat it like an idol, really.
And it's religiosity.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. That like, it's dangerous to the individual. Like, it's dangerous to everybody.
Yeah. I mean,
it's fine if you have like your own internal feelings about something. Like, oh, I love this country and the symbolism and all that. Like, okay, fine, knock yourself out. But
yeah.
it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Like, the flag is just some fabric stitched together, like, in different colors and patterns. It really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And I mean, the only like real code of conduct that's written down for how you're supposed to act with the flag is for the military. And even in that text, the strongest verbiage it uses is you should stand.
Yeah.
You should stand if you're in the military and you see the flag or whatever. Nowhere in that does it say if you're the quarterback for the 49ers, you must stand for the flag.
Well, and I there was actually I'm not going to dox anybody, but there was a person I know who had a daughter who went to a particular middle school, and they did the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Mm-hmm. And she didn't want to stand and do it. And he's like, you have to stand. You have to do this. And she's like, hell no, I don't. And I'm like, oh, hoorah!
Yeah.
Like, you go.
Yeah.
But there are people that really feel that way.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you have to pledge allegiance. And the thing is, like, the important thing, in my view, is I pledge allegiance to the flag. Not to the country, not to the state, not to anything else, to the flag. Mm-hmm. A symbol. Yeah. So symbols can be interpreted in any way you like. And
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but like, this guy got completely bent out of shape because she didn't want to, like, pledge allegiance. You didn't want to stand and salute and put your hand over your heart and stuff. Like, fuck you, I'm not going to do that. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
okay,
then there's the whole idea that we're one of a very few countries that pledge allegiance to a flag or to anything really in that respect, to the government or whatever.
Well, speak for yourself. Like, your country, people,
No, what I'm saying is, like, there's not that many countries that do it, but of the few that have, like, Nazi Germany was one, like, usually it's the more authoritarian places, like, most of the free countries in the world, the countries that are freer than us, just slightly less free than us, they don't do any of that crap,
Yeah.
I think Mexico is maybe the only, like, sort of free country that actually does it, and everything else has been very authoritarian.
But the important thing is, like, in fact, if you believe in freedom, you should defend to the death somebody's right to not do that.
Exactly, yeah. And I've heard a lot of soldiers voice that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I say a lot, it's probably less than the majority.
Well, small sample size. I mean, it's okay. But yeah, that's a valid point.
Yeah, and really, like, of all the things to get worked up about, that just really seems like, I don't know, small fish.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, you're not in the same camp as me.
Yeah.
So you're a threat.
Yeah, I mean, I've said before, throughout my life, I've gone through varying degrees of this, like, to the point where I actually looked into, like, joining the military at a point or two in my life, but
yeah, I have too.
But there have been more points than not where I don't really appreciate the actual institution of the military as we have it in this country, but I 100% respect the troops that make it up, and
yeah,
And a lot of people find difficulty, I guess, in carving those two things apart and seeing them as completely separate. But it's like, what's that saying? The sum is greater than the parts of the whole, or whatever.
Oh yeah. It's a synergistic thing.
Yeah, and a hand in the bush is worth two birds.
Oh man, we're going down a dark path right now, but that's okay. No, it's a good point that the ability to separate the state, the government, the system from the people. Because I see the military, like the soldiers and people, low-level people, as being just average, everyday people. Like, they don't make any high-level decisions. They're just carrying out orders, right?
Yeah.
But yet, this is the thing. Like the Vietnam War thing. Like, spit on the soldiers, oh, you're a murderer and stuff. Well, they didn't decide the course of action. It was Johnson and Nixon. Like, if you have a problem with how things went, go to them. Because they're the ones that chose the high-level doctrine, and then everybody else had to figure out how to carry it out. But oh no, they won't do that. Because, they're like a bigwig or something like that. I honestly, in the comment section, I want to know, why do people care about presidents and their doctrine, and like blame the soldiers? I don't understand it. I wish more soldiers would rebel and speak out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Ken Watanabe. You remember that?
Uh-huh.
Ken Watanabe, you remember that? He was out of Fort Lewis.
Yeah.
Back during the early days of this war, however long it's been, 50, 60 years or whatever that we've been in.
Yeah.
He basically was a conscientious objector. Like, he was already in the military. It wasn't like he got forced into it or anything. I think he might even signed up after the war had begun, but he refused to be deployed on moral grounds.
Yeah.
And everyone treated him like a goddamn traitor, and they wanted his head.
Well, and that's because of this media bullshit. Everybody was like, those ragheads and stuff in the Middle East and none of that. Like, dude, you've never met them.
Yeah.
And
they called him a coward, and it's like, there isn't maybe other explanations for why somebody who doesn't want to go to war. Like, you're either a chicken or you're going to war. Is that the whole dichotomy?
Yeah, it's called a spectrum.
Right. Yeah.
That's how you do that. Oh man.
It's like I don't particularly like war. I think sometimes you have to get into it or whatever. Usually a defensive measure would be my preferred.
Yeah, like
reason.
A last resort.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are dudes jumping over the border.
Yeah.
Shooting guns at you. Like, okay, well, that's time to defend yourself.
Yeah, but it's like this whole skirmish. I mean, like, what was the last time we actually got attacked on our soil? Pearl Harbor, right?
Pearl Harbor, yeah.
Pearl Harbor was by an organized army, a whole country. Their army was like, yeah, let's bomb them, and they bombed us, and we were like, okay, we're going to war with a country, and we jumped in, and we got our hands wet on that one.
Well, and we should probably, I don't know if we want to go into down the path of the conspiratorial angle of, like, we
Probably
actually
not.
knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, and we let it happen anyway.
Yeah, no, that's too much there.
Yeah.
But especially with the 9/11
Yeah.
tie-in. But, then we have terrorists who, like, spent probably decades organizing this one attack, and they don't belong to any particular country. And we went to war with a whole bunch of countries over this one fucking attack.
Well, that's
that wasn't
a good
going to be
point.
repeated at all.
Yeah, just because these people came from a particular place doesn't mean that the government of that place is to blame.
Right.
Like, it could be. Who knows? But, find the culprits and punish them.
Evidence.
Don't kill civilians. That's, like, for God's sake, don't kill civilians.
Yeah, I mean, like, in my recollection, in my lifetime, in my perception of ourselves to the rest of the world, that was the moment we became the world's bullies. Maybe we already were, but just for me, like, what I became aware of in my lifetime, that was the demarcation where we went from being like a really great country to kind of a schoolyard prick. Like, like shoving people around because we can, and just sticking our noses where we don't need to, and wearing out our welcome in other countries, and
oh yeah, why do we have like 70 military bases throughout the world?
It's
like,
ridiculous.
That's completely stupid.
I mean,
bring the troops home.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I get it. Honestly, looking at things in the world, the only place where I could see some justification for there being like a military base and U.S. soldiers would be South Korea. And that's it. Japan, they can fend for themselves. Like everybody else is fine.
Yeah.
But then again, like, that war is essentially, like, war, if you can call it that. Everybody who fought in the Korean War is mostly dead now. So who cares? Like, it's a dead war. Like, give it up. Go home. It's okay. Let's just fucking trade.
Yeah.
That's my doctrine. Sex and trade. That's the way you fix everything. It's time to end that. Like, it's bullshit. It's just, well, okay, so, thinking about it, have you heard about the World War I Christmas miracle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, in World War I, it was trench warfare. There were soldiers on the British side, the German side. They were lobbing bombs at each other all the time, shooting machine guns at each other. But then Christmas happened. And everybody was like, well, actually, I think it started with some singing. They started singing back and forth, and everybody emerged from the trenches and then drank together, smoked cigarettes, and exchanged gifts.
Yeah, ceasefire for Christmas.
Yeah, but the top brass was fucking angry at that. They were like, why are you not killing each other? Like, because we're people. That's the thing. That is the whole thing. Like, to the military, soldiers are seen as numbers. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah. I don't think that was just World War One, because I'm a Korean War expert because I've seen every episode of MASH, and there was an episode or two where Hawkeye ended up having Christmas drinks with the North Koreans, and because they're all Christian apparently. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be Christian to celebrate Christmas. I mean, it's just a fun time.
Mm-hmm. Come on. The point is, like, if you can do that for a day, just
keep going.
Keep going. Yeah.
Like, why can't you do it?
Why are we fighting? This is dumb. Like, if you get into a fight with someone and then you go sit and have a beer with them in an evening, you can figure out that you were fighting over stupid shit. And if you spend a whole day with a truce and a ceasefire and you still can't figure that out, something wrong.
That's a really good point. And that kind of goes back to the whole Heineken thing that was like the genesis of this show. Yeah. But, the thing is, you can't be manipulated when you're in that frame of mind. You can't be led, like, going back to the whole flag thing, right? You know, oh, desecrating the flag, like, all these people, like, patriotism and all this stuff. It's all bullshit. It doesn't mean anything. It's personal. And just because the state tells you to feel a certain way doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I'm about to go on a rant, but I'll just kind of chill out for a second.
I think a lot of people have fallen prey to that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the flag is something like way more than it really is to a lot of people. The whole idea that you have to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance is like ingrained in society, but it's never ever been true. A case in point. This is how this happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
One nation under God, indivisible, is about 70 years old.
Yeah.
It's not as old as the nation.
Yeah.
It was injected in there because of the whole propaganda about communism being atheist and all that stuff. And they were like, we need to become a more Christian nation. And now everybody who wasn't alive back then thinks we've always been a Christian nation with Sharia law.
It's kind of dumb that, like, they chose the Christian angle to combat communism. Like, there are better ways to do that.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. That's a great point.
And also just give people information. Let them decide for themselves. But they don't want that because all the better to control you with.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh man. Oh.
Yeah, Jesus was a socialist, which everyone conflates with communism. So
yeah,
it does seem a little odd that they chose that to be the anti-communism angle.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Man, but you know, why can't there be room for like 20 different ideas?
Well, exactly.
You know, like why does it have to
not?
be this or that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's either this or that. Either you're an American or you're a communist. Like I don't understand that.
Right. Yeah.
Why can't you be whatever you want to be?
I feel kind of excited right now because I'm seeing fractures in the foundation of both parties that we have.
I see that too.
And I just can't wait. All 6 of my nipples are tingling with excitement. I just can't wait for both of those parties to fracture and finally we're like, well, this really screws up the way we do the Electoral College. Guess we got to drop that. And then we'll have like 10, 20 different parties on the ballot. All kinds of ideas.
At the very least, there will be 4. Like, the Democrats will split into the Democrats and socialists-ish social Democrats. The Republicans will split into the classical Republicans, the conservatives.
I think they'll be gone altogether.
I
think they'll both be gone altogether. Just like Federalists disappeared. I think they're both just going away. Even the grand old party.
Yeah.
That's been around since the beginning, basically.
And that's good.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, there's only so long you could carry on with the same old. And the same old hasn't been very good to us. However, your political ideology aligns, it's been shit.
Right.
Let's face it.
For most people,
if you're a Democrat or a Republican, it's been shit.
Yeah.
Like it sucks. And maybe it's time for some new blood.
Yeah, that's why I really wasn't excited about Biden because he's like, let's go back to the way it was. I was like, that thing's still kind of sucked back then, dude.
Yeah.
Can we try to I don't know, aim for the higher fruit?
Yeah, exactly. Let's just status quo.
Let's pick up this old rotten apple that we were eating before. not even low hanging. It's just on the ground. And
I agree. Like, oh man, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see a new America. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's unpatriotic at all. I think that's the ultimate patriotism. Like, we get to try something new and learn from our mistakes and make it better.
Well, and going back to the founding fathers argument, like that's what they would like.
Yeah.
Right? The grand experiment. Right? They didn't know, we didn't know, nobody knows. And we're just learning from our mistakes and moving on.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the same thing works over and over again, but not very often. Like, AC/DC has written the same song 150 times, and they're all great. They're all great. But, like, they have a formula or whatever.
But they don't run for office.
Right,
that's the whole thing.
Right. There's like, it's like, oh, if you get kind of tired, you just stop listening to AC/DC for a while because, it's the same song.
Yeah.
And then, but you can come back to it and be like, oh yeah, I remember I like this or whatever. It's not like that with politics. We just get stuck with the same in blue, the same in red.
Yeah, back and forth.
And we're told that they're different, but they're not.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is, AC/DC doesn't point guns at you
Yeah.
and tell you, listen to our music.
Yeah, it's
like that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's like if Democrats were AC/DC, Republicans would be AC/DC and check gingham dresses. Like, it'd just be the same shit with like dressed up in red.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's a really interesting angle. Like, and it's not unpatriotic. Like, in fact, I would say rebellion, dissent, questioning is
revolution.
Revolution, like it's the height of
spark
patriotism. Had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, like if something's working, keep it up, be proud of it, great.
Mm-hmm.
When things start going wrong, for like a good chunk of people,
Yeah,
I mean, let's face it, the majority of people in this country maybe aren't super bad off, but the majority of people, I think, would admit that there are plenty of ways to improve.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever your opinions on, how bad things are, I think most people can agree it could be better.
Yeah, honestly, I think in the U.S., at least, things are pretty okay. Like, if you live here, you're probably fairly all right. I mean, even if, like you said, it could be better.
Yeah.
We're not a third world country. We're not sub-Saharan Africa or something like that. Well, it depends on where you live, too. Coastal cities, rural, urban, like, I mean, and that goes back to the whole thing. Like, I don't think we can see the U.S. as a homogenous entity. Mm-hmm. It's too big. Yeah, maybe 200 years ago, it might be possible, but not so much now. But the thing is, like, the whole patriotism thing, like, it scares people.
What scares people?
Well, like, challenges to patriotism.
Oh, right, yeah.
They like, oh,
I don't know if well, maybe for some people it's a fear, but I think for others it's like just an outright offense. Like you've just spit in their face to suggest that things could be improved in the country.
Well, and the origin of that is the idea that, like, well, my idea is the right idea.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and their response is always like, well, if you don't like it, move to another country or whatever. And it's like, well, I can say the same to you. Like, if you don't like improving the country, Why don't you go somewhere that's stale? You know.
Well, yeah, and exactly. Now, granted, what is improvement? It's subjective. Um, I, your idea of improvement is probably different than mine. Um, so we might have a little bit of head to head in that regard. Um, but having a place where that can coexist is very valuable. Because it should. It could. Like, those kinds of concepts should be able to coexist. Like, I don't see how you wanting to do your thing and me wanting to do mine. Like, I don't see how they conflict.
Yeah. I kind of want to make. It would probably be like a huge series of episodes, really, but I think we should really like hash out some ideas about better ways of doing things, and have that kind of coalesce into like that outline I started drafting about a new system of government, and
Yeah.
like really just kind of take ideas from viewers and from guests and bouncing things off each other and think about like, you know, because we've got like pretty similar but also very different perspective
Yeah.
views on things, and the whole premise is that we tend to want the same things and see different ways of getting there, but there could be a way to make it all jive.
Well, it's like a unifying theory kind
Yeah.
of thing, right? Like physics.
Yeah.
And because the thing is, like, this is important for everybody to understand. If you have conversations with people, you're going to find that most people want the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, most people want the same end goals, like world peace, end to hunger, you know, like everybody being happy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just how you achieve those. And I the way I look at it is like, I don't know, like, I know what would make me happy, but what would make me happy is different than what would make you happy.
Yeah.
So if we had like a grand system that said, like, you know, decree from on high, you know, you have to do all these things to be happy. Be fucking happy. You know, like, I don't know that would work.
No.
Um,
That can't really be like the outright goal, I guess. Like,
yeah.
it has to be something that's more facilitated. I just thought of a really good analogy regarding patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, so the founding fathers kind of built it in that if things were going wrong, there's a way to like rise up and change it all, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jefferson.
Yeah.
Like,
So-
revolution just spilled the blood and guts of patriots
Yeah.
and
So,
tyrants. Like,
let's
you
say revolution and building a new country from scratch or from the rubble or the ashes or whatever. Let's call that a DNR. Do not resuscitate. Now, your country is like your wife. Your wife is in a coma and will never wake up. She signed a DNR. But you're just hanging on. Your love for your wife is patriotism for this dying America. And,
Ooh, man.
and if you just cut it loose and let it go mercifully, you can love again. You can have patriotism again for a new country.
Damn, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Oh.
in that perspective, I think it makes so much sense, and it could be so much easier for someone to process. Like, yeah, you know, like if I did have a loved one that was like just going to be a vegetable for the rest of their lives, I think I would have to just let them go as much as it would hurt in the moment. everything would be so much better off going forward, you know?
Oh, man.
Because right now, we're dragging ourselves through the mud.
Well, and politically, we're like going back and forth, like, oh, heave ho, like it's a tug of war.
Yeah.
Right, and we're getting nowhere. The knot is going here, it's going there, it's going there, it's going there. And for like 200 years, 200 fucking years, we haven't figured this shit out.
Yeah.
Go.
Instead of a tug of war, we should be dancing around the maypole.
I agree. Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, this is good.
Yeah. There's a lot of angles that can come out of a discussion about kneeling for a flag. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
there's so many directions to go, like that we kind of like glossed over some of, you know.
Probably so. I mean, we'll like as usual, we'll come back to them.
Yeah.
But you know, the whole flag thing. It's like, at some point, you have to let the symbolism go.
Yeah.
Like, I like this place. I'm not gonna say this country. I like this place. Like where I live is pretty all right. It could be better. It could be worse.
Cruise through town, get a tan. That should be the song, actually.
Totally should be, yeah. Yeah, but like, you know, the idea that like you're somehow a piece of this flag, this nation, you know, this amorphous structure that is your country. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, what is a border? What is a country? I don't know. I don't even care, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I like the people that are around me. That's it. Like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna go down a tangent there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's important for people to like question things, to be suspect of people that are selling you snake oil.
Yeah.
And there are a lot more people selling you snake oil than there are people selling you retribution.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I'm curious how other countries view the connection between their military and their country.
Yeah.
Because we have this, like, almost like they're, well, almost like that whole Holy Trinity Catholic thing, where they're like different, but they're the exact same thing. You know, the country and the soldiers and the military are this trinity that are all the same thing, or maybe throw the flag in there or something. You know, like,
and an eagle.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
with
well,
the hawk sound. And the,
America, fuck yeah, you know, like, that's some pretty good satire, honestly.
Yeah. Because really, like, I would actually like to bring on an actual soldier or ex-soldier or, you know, military officer or whatever and get their perspective on whether or not they see a difference between the individual soldier and the military as a whole.
Yeah.
Versus the country, versus the flag, you know, like, do you see those all as intertwined or separate things? Are they related? Are they the same? Blah, blah, blah,
Well,
you know?
and that's kind of going back to something we talked about in season 1, you know, about Iraq.
Uh-huh.
Or Iran, actually. No, not Iraq. Well, maybe. But Iran, they don't, the average person doesn't see themselves as a citizen of Iran. They're Persians. And they see a distinct difference between the state of Iran and themselves. like their neighbors and stuff like that. And we should do the same. Like, and maybe that would avert war. Like, I do not want to go to war. Oh, do not want that. Like,
there's so many better ways to spend money and preserve life. And, you know, like all the lives that are lost in war, just think of the potential contributions that they would have made to the world.
oh yeah, yeah. And like even the technology and stuff. Like, what if we had redirected the money and blood and all the stuff we have spent, in the nuclear program to space?
Well, okay, there's an interesting angle, because if we hadn't come up with the technology for the nuclear bomb, we wouldn't have such clean, efficient energy as nuclear energy necessarily. So out of war does sometimes come good things, or like the horrible experiments the Nazis did on the Jews that taught us so much about physiology to save lives, like countless lives.
No, I totally agree. Like, but we should
but
recognize those for what they are.
Yeah, but that's not to say that had we not had war at all, those things wouldn't have been discovered by some other brilliant mind that got killed senselessly. So
that's a good point.
So you can't really fall back on the what ifs too much, you know.
Mm-hmm. No, and I would never do that. Like oh man!
Wow, this is pretty epic conversation.
This is actually like
too many good sound bites.
Yeah. Oh man, this is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, but I definitely would love to have somebody from the military, probably ex-military, so they have a little more autonomy in what they say.
Yeah, because yeah,
because I just want to like mini rant here about how bullshit I think it is that people in the military don't have as many rights as we do. Honestly,
yeah,
like they don't have the right to free speech. Really, if you break it down, they can't disparage the president. Like, if they get caught doing that publicly, there's real ramifications to that. Some of them do it. Some of them do it anyway, but like a lot of them are just scared to do it or find creative ways to not talk about it. You know, like there's a real problem with that. But like at the same time, I happen to know this to be a thing. The military itself will kind of, in a cursory way, dig on the president here and there, because as soon as Trump became president, so when you retire from the military, the sitting president like writes you a letter or whatever and thanks you for your service and signs it or whatever. Mm-hmm. As soon as Trump became president, for the first time in the history of this country, you could choose to receive that retirement letter from any living president.
I choose Jimmy Carter. Yeah. Not that he was a good president.
He's just a good dude.
Just like an amazing person.
Yeah. And actually, like, for all I criticize W, like, he's a really good dude. Mm-hmm. Like, he's a good guy.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, if you see his ex-presidential stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. Like, we have to move away from the political and look at the humanitarian.
Yeah, gotta separate the two, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like, I don't agree with George W.'s politics, but the dude is a really genuine, remorseful guy. Like, he had hard decisions to make, and he feels bad about how they turned out.
And he's a great painter.
Yeah, he really
good.
Dove into that.
Yeah.
That was awesome, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like, being subservient to the state and, just doing what you're told and stuff, that is problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other episode we got to do about the whole idea of blind, too much beer.
Me too.
What's the word?
Blind
obedience. Blind obedience.
Blind obedience.
Yeah,
okay.
like I don't see obedience, like blind obedience, as a virtue whatsoever, but it is ingrained into the military as like the utmost virtue. To like follow orders.
Well, the thing is, like, obedience to what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you and I, like, if you told me, I feel very strongly about this thing, and I'm a scientist and a biologist, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to defer to your superior knowledge. Because I don't know anything about that. But somehow people, like, really get all... They put a lot of faith in people that are elected based on a popularity contest.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that bothers me. Like, yeah. I mean, if you just, like, took up a machine gun... No machine gun. You just took up, like, a knife and just, like, knifed a bunch of people and stuff, I'd be like, wow, what a badass! Like, oh, you're a badass. I would trust you about knife technology and techniques.
That has me thinking, if we're going to have war, it should really be more like the Klingons, where, like, it's hand-to-hand combat.
I agree.
Even if we have the technology to shoot each other or drop bombs with drones or whatever, like, there should just be a human, unwritten rule that if you're gonna fight, you do it face to face.
I'll tell you what human should inhabit that machine. It should be the politicians who decree we should fight.
Yeah.
Lead the charge. Oh, if you're a leader, get in the cockpit. I want to see you fighting.
Where did we stop doing that? Because kings used to ride into battle.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
King Arthur.
Yeah. It was like, they weren't above that shit.
Yeah.
In fact,
they led the charge.
They would have lost the support of their, or the respect of their constituents if they didn't. So they knew, it's like, hey, if I have to call this a war, I better put up or shut up,
Yeah. So where do we lose that point where, like, somebody's like, yeah, we're gonna send like 150,000 people to their death,
or more
for like bullshit reasons. I'm gonna sit back in my nice little palace.
We're gonna talk about the war in a war room.
Yeah,
and somehow call ourselves contributing to it.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like that is a huge problem.
Like at some point that like morphed into, it went from the king riding into battle to the general being out in the battlefield but in a tent, like heavily guarded. And now they're like in a sub-basement bunker under the White House, like holed up safely and not in any danger whatsoever, and
viewed as like some kind of god.
We've gone from a wolf to a freaking dachshund. Like
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like,
and that's what we're saluting a flag for, right?
Hoorah!
Yeah, our pussy president. Yeah.
Oh man. Whoa. I think that
not only demonetized, but the NSA is going to be knocking the door down.
Oh, they totally will. That's all right. Bring it on, bros.
Bring it on.
Come on.
Got you a Musco. Inside joke.
Yeah.
Not a threat.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
That might be a good point to end on.
I think...
I still have half a beer, but...
That's probably enough beer. That was a pretty good conversation, but I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts down in the comment section. Yeah, because I think there's some stuff we left untouched.
Oh, a whole lot. And
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of, like, impassioned people.
Oh, yeah, and they're going to be like, well, why didn't you, like, fucking punch each other? Like, because we believe in the same kind of general philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely leave some comments if you've got some really burning questions. Maybe you'd want to come on the show and hash it out with us. You know, maybe you totally disagree with everything we said. Maybe you're 50-50, or maybe you like fully agree, but you've got some ideas that we didn't even cover, because this is such a huge like topic that.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's way bigger than kneeling in a flag. It's about like separating the flag from the soldiers, separating the soldiers from the military from the country. You know, like there's so much integration that doesn't really need to be.
Yeah. Oh man, that is.
Anyway, going off again.
I think this is a pretty good point to end on. Oh man.
So yeah, wow.
Yeah, and keep the conversation going down in the comments section or on ksmvidcast.com. Yeah.
You almost said pgtlaser.com, didn't you?
Almost.
Old website.
Oh, that's like old school.
Yeah, so thanks for deep sea diving with us into the flag and the military and the soldiers and the country at large and the world at large and humanity at large.
Yeah.
It covered a lot. Shit.
Oh, fuck yeah. And, you know, what is a country? What are borders? Like, okay.
Politics.
Yeah, politics. I'll just, like, end it there. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.
Everything's perfect, everything's right. Birds are singing, girls jogging, sun in the sky, wind in my hair, children playing, people laughing. Could it be better? It could be worse. Cruise through town, get a tan, pleasant dreams, pretty things. Am I dreaming? This is too good. But the clouds will always rain down to haunt me every waking hour. The sun was already there to burn. Explain to me why I'm not happy now. All alone, no one's home. Why am I not happy now? Quiet moan, stupid song. Why am I not happy now? Long day, shitty thing. Why am I not happy now? What to say? Why be gay? Why should I be happy?
Be fucking happy.